Hi, I'm John, and this is my video about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, what it is, and running through and giving a high-level overview of each phase in the framework. So what is the Cloud Adoption Framework? The Cloud Adoption Framework is a framework written and provided by Microsoft to help organisations implement business and technology strategies for successful cloud adoption. It helps cater for an organisation's unique business goals, and it's composed of best practices, recommendations, documentation, tools, and an insight into the common mistakes that can be made. It's targeted at cloud architects, IT professionals, and business decision makers. So the framework is targeted at both the business and technological side of successful cloud adoption. So this illustrates the phases in the cloud adoption framework, and in the following slides I'm going to dive into each one and give a brief overview into what the phase is about. So you can see here we work on strategy, plan, ready, and adopt, and these are considered to be the project phases. We then have secure, manage, and govern, which are ongoing phases, though the secure, manage, and govern phases are also part of the project. They are from beginning and to the end of the project, and then on an ongoing basis as well. So phase one is strategy, and this is about defining your business justification and what the expected outcomes are from your cloud adoption. So this phase is very business orientated. We need to understand what are the motivations from the business and what are the expected outcomes. Motivations might include agility, reducing costs, innovation for new technologies, etc. Expected business outcomes are used to measure the success of the adoption. And as part of strategy, we also define a financial model that importantly justifies the adoption based on what those expected outcomes are. So to give some examples of some of the motivations that a business might have for adopting the cloud, we've got cost. So transitioning from a capital expenditure, which we typically have in an on-premises environment, a lot of upfront cost for hardware, implementation, the project phase. There's a lot of capital expenditure, whereas the cloud allows us to transition to a more operational expenditure. We then have agility, the ability to quickly scale up and down to meet demand. Operational resilience, some of the services available in the cloud for providing disaster recovery, easily getting, for example, resilience between two data centers in two completely different countries, which in an on-premises or in your own hosted data center would be a very complex job potentially. Then got innovation, which is to spur new product development and improve existing processes. And finally, geographical expansion, which is to quickly deploy services and applications in different parts of the world as required. So to give some examples of measurable business outcomes, so we'll be defining those as part of strategy, defining those business outcomes that the business wants to see, and these should be tangible measures that we can measure our success against at a later stage. So the most successful transformations start with the business outcome in mind. Some examples are improved application response time or reduced system downtime, achieving a certain percentage of cost savings or return on investment, reducing time to deploy new features or updates, customer satisfaction scores, or increasing active users. So you'll notice all of these outcomes are tangible and measurable. We then have phase two, which is plan. And plan is around analysing the digital estate, looking at the current environment, VMs, servers, applications, hardware. That is our digital estate, and we need to get a picture of it. When we've got that, we can consider the 5 R's of rationalisation: rehost, refactor and re-architect, rebuild and replace. So these are 5 different approaches we can take towards an existing application and hosting it on the cloud. Rehost means lift and shift, which in the case of virtual machines would be migrating that virtual machine, running the virtual machine in the cloud. No massive change to the overall architecture of the application. Of course, there's going to be new networking and new services around it, but ultimately the VM as it is, with all of its configurations and registry entries and file structure, for example, will come with it. Refactor means to make changes to the code to be appropriate for cloud native services. Re-architect is a more advanced refactor. This is when the application hasn't necessarily been written to fit a cloud architecture very well. Then we've got rebuild, which is to rebuild the application from scratch if there's justification for doing that. There could be many reasons, but we also need to make sure that it's justified that we rebuild applications. And finally, replace. This is when we've got an application that we think can be replaced with a SaaS service, so that would be marked for a later migration and cut over to a SaaS service. So rationalization doesn't need to wait for the business justification or the digital estate to be fully analysed. So this can often delay cloud adoption when we're trying to do all of the digital estate and business justification before we start any rationalisation. What we can actually do is start the rationalisation early. So plan ultimately aligns your technical choices with the desired business outcomes. It allows us to design the foundational architecture to support those business outcomes. And then we also work on the cloud adoption plan, which is to manage change across skills and the digital estate and your organisation. Phase 3 is ready, and this is primarily around the technical implementation of an Azure platform. So it doesn't concern workloads at this stage, although it does put the Azure services in place ready to support Azure workloads. So there's 8 critical design areas. We've got stuff such as identity, the tenant, and how we're getting our subscriptions, or if we use an enterprise agreement, then how we would organise the enterprise agreement as well. We've got networking, platform DevOps, management and monitoring. So in each of those critical design areas, the Cloud Adoption Framework gives us recommendations and considerations. The considerations are informational of what you might need to think about as you make decisions in each of these critical design areas, and then recommendations, which are pretty specific about the recommended way to do your networking, how or where to deploy a firewall in the cloud, what traffic to control with the firewall. So in all of those different areas is recommendations, and this guides us to successful technical implementation based on the experiences of other Microsoft customers. We then got DevOps adoption and configuration. So Phase 3 includes Bicep modules, Terraform modules that will implement an Azure platform that is aligned to the recommendations that are made in the CAF. So all of those technical recommendations can be followed and implemented very quickly using the Terraform and the infrastructure as code modules. It also provides DevOps pipelines or Azure DevOps pipelines or GitHub Action pipelines to deploy it as well. So it can take a lot of the effort out of deploying the Azure platform. The biggest time to take with deploying the Azure platform using those resources that Microsoft provides will be tailoring it to meet your specific recommendations. So as you're looking at your business outcomes and doing your designs and architecture to meet the business outcomes, you are going to stray away from all of the recommendations. You're going to have your own naming conventions or your own structure for things like management groups. So there will be some changes you need to make to the infrastructure as code, but it still takes a lot of the effort out of deploying the platform, and also saves you writing infrastructure as code modules from scratch when you can use that code instead. So ultimately, phase 3 covers the deployment of an Azure platform aligned to the business and technical requirements. And it will put all the governance, the infrastructure in place ready to support your workloads in the next phase. A key part of ready as well as governance and compliance. So Azure policies, controlling what can be created in the environment ready for the workloads. Phase 4 is adopt, and this is where we get your applications running in the Azure environment that we've created. So this might include migrating, modernising, innovating or relocating workloads based on the findings in phase 2, the plan phase. Efficiently moving existing applications or infrastructure to the cloud and building new cloud-native solutions or modernising existing solutions. We then have secure, which is one of the ongoing phases, and this is to establish and maintain security posture across the cloud environment. Phase 6, which is to manage, ensuring optimal operations and continual improvement of the cloud environment. Regularly reviewing the cloud adoption's alignment to the business outcomes. So even after completion of the environment and you've got some of your workloads in there, continuing to measure against those business outcomes to ensure successful cloud adoption in accordance to what your business has defined. And continually refining and optimizing resources, costs, and operations. So this is an ongoing process of optimizing resources, keeping on top of costs, and the way that you operate the environment. The final phase is to govern, which means to manage, monitor, and govern the cloud environment, aligned to your organizational standards, policies, controls, and oversight. So this plugs into the ready phase, where we're implementing those policies to control our environment, but that is an ongoing process again. That concludes my presentation on the Cloud Adoption Framework. Thank you for watching.